Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. In this video we're going to take you through how I painted the delaque expansion set for Necromunda, more specifically the Piscean Inspector, because I've already got a painting guide for the delaques themselves, which I'll put a link in the description down below if you want to check out that painting guide. But we're showing the finished effect here, so if you like that, carry on watching. Typical YouTube fashion. If you enjoy what I do, subscribe down below, hit the bell icon, all that kind of stuff. And if you do fancy it, check out my Facebook page and my Instagram for other hobby content. Now I've started off the models with a black spray with lead belcher spray over the top, massively time saving because there's a lot of metal parts on Necromunda figures, and I also really like the effect that putting the paint on top of metal has. And it is worth experimenting with the spray base coats because time saving and for that sort of impact you can have on the top. Now I'm showing you through a few models in the gang here, but as I said, we're going to focus on the Piscean Inspector because this is the model in the gang that's dramatically different from what I've already covered in my delaque painting guide. Now the Piscean Inspector is this kind of weird amalgam between Xenos creature that's in the bowels of the Necromunda world and this construct the delaque have done. And the areas where it kind of merges together underneath the brain pan, around the limbs, underneath the armour panels, we're going for a dark brown colour to kind of represent that semi-organic area and that melding, and then we're going for a light brown where all the straps and things that are keeping this construct together are kind of being shown. I think it's a really interesting model for that purpose. It's something completely different from anything we've seen for the gangs so far. I really do like it. And then this exposed brain, it's a bit strange having it exposed, but it's the rule of cool, I guess. So we're going for a pale flesh colour on that kind of brain area. Now all the colours I use, I'm going to use down below. You can follow the exact colours if you wish, or just take inspiration from it. Now, from the brain, you've got all these cables that I suppose are transmitting the psychic energy. Going for a light blue on there. Made a bit of a mistake here. Thought I'd leave that in just to show you that whenever you make a mistake in a model, it's not the end of the world. We've got a blue blob of paint on there, so I've quickly cleaned my brush, bit of water on it, banged it onto that blue paint and just taken it off, and we're back to normal, absolutely fine. Back onto painting the blue cabling. And to me, that's how I've improved over the years, making less mistakes to start with, but secondly, quickly fixing them when you know you've made them and kind of how to fix them. Now moving on to the, I suppose, face of this construct, going for a black. It ties it in with a lot of what I've done to my delaque gangs. You'll see that I do the weapons casing in black. Also takes away some of that kind of vast metal surface we're working with. You could leave a lot more of this model metal if you wished, but I quite like the effect of that sort of black armour panels there. And I've just done it around the face and kind of behind where these vents are, I suppose, that represent the ears of this model. And then moving on to what is, I suppose, the feature colour of this spectre, which is that kind of brass colour. Now it fits in really well because I've used brass in a lot of my Necromunda gangs to represent the kind of more expensive metals, the sort of showier things, and my leaders and stuff will have more brass on them. So it's quite fitting that this strange floating creature that's obviously going to cost a lot of credits to make has got quite a lot of brass on it. So actually it blends quite well with a lot of how we're doing my gang. And you can see we're nearly at the finishing stage now for the base colours. Just putting a little bit of red onto the eye gems, or the kind of sensors that got the front there, and really that we are done. And again, using a smaller brush than I was using before on this one, I'm just trying to be as careful as we possibly can. So now we're on to an ink stage. Starting off on the base, we're using a sepia ink wash now onto the custom bases you're seeing here. Now, no matter what model I'm doing in my Necromunda collection, they all have the same base. That ties them into my scenery, ties the kind of world together. And this is a sort of dirty sepia ink kind of wash, because we're in the grim darkness of the Underhive. Now moving on to the actual model, we're not going to put that sepia wash on the model itself because my delaque I want slightly cleaner, doing a bit of a spooky effect, but we're going to do a different wash on the brain area than we are on the rest of the model. So we're using a druchi violet because we want that kind of weird purpley brain effect. You'll notice I am taking it straight from the pot with the Games Workshop stuff. Bit risky, open pot's never a great idea, but I don't tend to decant the Games Workshop inks because they cost a lot, and you know, you don't want to waste too much, but just be very careful if you're going to use an ink pot open because they can make a horrible mess if you do knock them over. Now what we're using now is null oil on every other part. Now I have left the purple ink and the base ink to dry for about an hour, and then we've just null oiled every other part of the model, including the stand. And that is now 3 different inks used across the model. You can see when it's dried, quite a nice effect. Null oil makes it that kind of dark, mysterious, oily looking effect. Very different from what I've done on some of the gangs, but I've done this with my previous delaques and sort of really liked the effect. So now we're onto the highlight layer. Now I'm starting off on the retributor armour, so it's the brass colour, but all the next stages are effectively the same. What we're trying to do is put down a highlight layer. Now you want to avoid the recesses where there'll be lots of ink sat in there, and also try and leave a bit from between the recess to the raised area, because then what you do when you put the colour back on, you'll have a really dark patch where the ink has settled. You'll have a slightly lighter patch as you move away from the recess, and then you'll have like a third colour where you put down the original colour, and it almost looks like you've done 3 layers. Very time saving, and looks really impactful. A lot of people don't like using inks because look, you can get a more championship class standard if you don't and you just work through layered paints and blending. But this is hugely time saving, and for me, my preferred method for most of my armies, apart from when I go to sort of characters or presentation. Now we're going to work on the brain matter area, so you can see how that purple ink has dried. I don't know if you saw it, but on the wet palette there, I've just put some extra water onto some of the pale flesh colour there, because what we're trying to do is almost a glaze, not quite, but almost a glaze onto here. So it's probably 3 parts water to 1 part paint, and we're just very gently layering it onto that brain area on the raised areas. And you'll see it looked quite stark when we first put it on, and it's not quite as stark now that it's dried that little bit more. Mixed in a little bit of the off-white colour into the flesh colour we've used there, and again putting that on, and it looks very stark initially, but you've got to always remember that these colours will dry differently, especially when you're glazing it, and it will give you that kind of nice opaque effect onto that brain, and it won't just be like you're putting white straight on top of that purple brain colour. Doing the same thing now we've already discussed on the piping, so putting the blue just on the raised areas, and if you look there, you've got those gradations from, again, in the real recess shadow area right up to the highlight layer that we're just kind of doing, all from using one colour and an ink wash. Let's say if you wanted to push it even further, you could mix a highlighter colour into this blue we're using, or the browns we're just showing you there. You could mix that and do a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th layer, but we're going for the gaming standard on this, and having the bulkier army done like this would look actually really, really nice and very impactful. So now going back onto the eye gems you've seen there, just using again that original red colour, same principle. Now we've not done anything on the metal so far other than the spray work and the ink wash. Did do a bit of tidying up that was off camera, but nothing too massive. What we're taking now is a gunmetal colour, and we're just putting this on the very, very edges of these panels. Now that will give, again, a nice sort of highlight reflective layer. We're not putting it all over though, because we want to keep most of the metal quite oily and dark. And here we're back to the shot we saw at the start with the finished model. You'll see from the brain I talked about there about how it dries differently. You can see, we've not taken away a lot of that purple effect. It looks really nice and fleshy and gives a real nice contrast to the rest of the model. And here's the finished add-on gang. Again, if you want to see how I did the gang itself, I'll put the description, or link in the description down below, so you can see the original delaque colour scheme. But look, I think these fit really, really well with the original delaque gang. I really like how this Piscean Inspector looks. It's a great model, and something really different for the delaque. So hope you enjoyed that, and hopefully I will see you back on this channel the next time. Cheers.